There was a time when Neil Armstrong was the most well-known person in the world. But, despite the notoriety, he never used his fame for personal gain. As Brian Williams reported, Neil could have easily owned a chain of moon burger joints. He could have challenged the wealth of a Donald Trump. Instead, he remained a private person until he died. For someone who never considered himself special, everyone else did. The world praised him in all languages. Every radio and television spoke his name, and newspapers and magazines everywhere heralded stories about his accomplishments. In a quiet, critical way, the fame annoyed Neil. He considered most of the stories were from the outside looking in. He very much wanted stories written from the inside, giving credit due others. He wanted not a book about himself, but a book about all flyers and astronauts. An interesting, moving, entertaining, factual book about those who flew from decks pitching at sea, from runways hacked through jungles, from desert strips, and from snow-laden mountain slopes. Those who rode rockets from launch pads to live on orbiting outposts. Those who rode spacecraft to the moon and always found their way back. These were the people who punched holes in the sky, raced moonward, and Neil was convinced any one of them could have flown the same flights he did. He regarded Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff a great yarn and good filmmaking, but terrible history. The wrong people working on the wrong projects at the wrong times. A project that bore no resemblance whatever to what was actually going on. Neil said, "What else could you expect written by one who never got closer to spaceflight than a Manhattan penthouse?" For a half-century, Neil Armstrong lived flight and space travel, and he and I talked about writing a book from the inside. But every time we got close, Neil found he was not comfortable writing about himself. He could in no way brag his accomplishments were greater than others, and finally he told me, "Jay, you write it. You're a pilot. You're one of us." There are only a couple of things I truly know. First, as a pilot, I couldn't carry Neil Armstrong's lunchbox. Second, I was never going to find a way to drag Neil to a keyboard to write about Neil because he simply marched to his own drummer. He wasn't much for rubbing elbows. He was quiet without being shy, with a well-thought-out fairness in his sense of humor and his brand of justice. By some people's measurements, he was a recluse. Over the years, Neil and I did write together. Not about his notable deeds, but rather about most anything that did not praise Neil Armstrong.